Welcome back to another episode of Do What You Love. I'm Jeff Kirkshin, and I'm excited to chat with our guests today. You know, if you've listened to episodes in the past, you know, sometimes I have guests that I've known for years, people that have been in my life for an enormous amount of time. I mean, obviously, we started the podcast with my dad, which is a great place to start, but you can't really beat that relationship. But then there's also on the other side of people I've met over social media, people I follow, and Lindsey Brown is one of those people. Literally, the first time we spoke was moments before recording. I slid into her DMs on Twitter. Lindsey Brown is absolutely so talented. 1140 The Bet in Las Vegas. She has her own show weekdays from 3 to 5 p.m. She is so talented. She's a hockey expert, and she knows her way around Las Vegas. She's a former player, former coach. I'll stop bragging about her and bring her in. Lindsey Brown, how are you, my friend?
I'm doing pretty good. I'll take an intro like that. It's a little bit longer than what I was used to ahead of the games that I used to play. But again, it's a resume booster, if anything, for me going forward.
So you're from the Midwest right off the bat, and you moved to Las Vegas. Biggest difference for you from those two just completely different parts of the country?
I mean, I'm from Minnesota, so the snow thing is definitely something that I noticed in terms of the absence. But since everybody has discovered daylight savings again, I'd say that's probably the most kind of background noise difference, because when you have the cold, when you have the snow in Minnesota, everybody has the darkness. But with all of those things existing on top of one another, it was kind of a no-brainer, in addition to the opportunities that Las Vegas offered to me professionally, in addition to escaping the polar vortex and the darkness of the abyss.
Right. Well, listen, I went to school, Syracuse University, so I definitely know the snow world.
You get it, Jeff.
Yeah, and I lived in Cleveland, Ohio for quite some time after that, so coming to Las Vegas was like a vacation for me, and living here now almost 4 years. And then you move to a city, you know, you go from Minnesota, which is like hockey central. I mean, everybody knows and loves hockey. Everybody skates to Vegas. In our little world, nobody knew anything about hockey before the Golden Knights showed up. And then even when they showed up, everyone's like, what the hell's a blue line? Is it weird for you to be this hockey expert? You grew up playing, you played in college, to moving to a town that doesn't even know what offsides is?
It's very weird at times, but it's also, I think, what drew me, or at least one of the big aspects that drew me to coming down to this market, because you said it's damn near a religion in Minnesota. I played college hockey at Ohio State for a year, and then finished up my career out in Manchester, New Hampshire. So the East Coast is very similar too. And when I saw the first couple of seasons transpiring with the Golden Knights, and as I was trying to connect the dots for me professionally, I came down here for I believe it was the Sharks series in the second season. So it was the first couple home games here, and I was just walking around outside the arena, and I just never really seen an atmosphere outside. And I didn't get to go in the rink, and I've since, and now we all understand exactly what T-Mobile Arena, what the Fortress is and everything. But the severity that everybody was bought all in was something that I've never really experienced in a hockey community ever. And it's an amazing fan base that they have down here in Vegas, and that one that they continue to build off of. But it certainly has its drawbacks. I mean, it's tough sometimes to try to boil down hockey calculus concepts to more simplified terms, but ultimately that's my job. That's what I'm good at. And I think they always say, if you could explain something to a first or second grader, you're usually in a good spot as a teacher. So that's what I'm trying to be.
I think that's a great way of putting it. And I wanted to ask you about that because my best friend, my best man, Alex Parker, college hockey goalie, college coach turned high school teacher, high school coach, and also coaches for those travel leagues, which are all super intense, especially on the East Coast and Midwest. And so I grew up going to his games, and boy, oh boy, did I not know literally anything about hockey, but I loved going. But he was able to kind of boil it down for me to an literal elementary level so that I could understand when I'm going to a game. We would go to games together and go, okay, so this is what we're looking for. Because people are subbing, people are moving. Like, I grew up playing baseball.
Completely different language. You're trying to base it usually off of like your initial sports experience, whether you're like a football person or a soccer person. You're like, well, what's the equivalent of a forward? What's the equivalent of a seam pass? You're looking for all these little shared things. And you mentioned your buddy was a goalie. great type of person to go to. I was a netminder myself. There's a reason why we are good at explaining things, because first of all, we've seen it all and we know exactly how the breakdowns happen, but usually we have to communicate pretty quickly exactly what we need to our teammates. So coaching that pipeline, that grassroots lifestyle, that's what I was doing before I moved down here. And so kudos to him, and kudos to you for giving hockey a chance, because there's no better product to watch in person, I think.
Oh, I think the atmosphere, not just, I mean, people talk about T-Mobile Arena being one of the best atmospheres to
Yeah.
watch a game. I would agree. I've only had the pleasure of going to 2 other arenas for a hockey game, but in perspective, any arena has just got a huge energy. I think there's a romanticness of going to a baseball game, a Twins game, which I'm sure you went to many of those.
Oh, yeah.
Getting a cold beer, enjoying a hot dog. But I think there's a different kind of environment for every sporting event. The tailgating that you get with football and college football, and then the hockey environment is just another animal. You mentioned that you're a former player, you're a former coach, and now you're a radio host. What has been the biggest difference between making that change from coaching day in, day out, and working with people who know everything about hockey, to going to Las Vegas, a town that's learning hockey? What's the biggest difference for you, the change between those two positions?
Man, I think it's the gear shifting in terms of what hat I'm wearing, or what helmet I'm wearing, I should say, because as just like news comes down, because like for me, I just look at myself as a processor. I take in information, and then every day for 2 hours, I basically have a pop quiz on what's going on currently and like what's happened as of late. And in terms of being able to dissect what's going on as a player versus what I see from like my coaching eyes, like if you just look at where the goalie stands on the ice when they're playing versus where the coach does when the game's going on, do you think they're gonna have 2 different perspectives on how the game goes? Completely 2 different experiences, obviously. And so for me, it's hard sometimes to be able to decipher which one's the best person for this moment. And especially in the last couple of weeks that we've had in hockey, where there's a lot of really tough conversations going, a lot of trauma in the game, and just knowing how to handle that, and handle that for people that might have experienced trauma in their life elsewhere or at the rink, and be able to make space for everyone. And so just trying to be an overall perfect person for the situation, I think that's the biggest struggle. But as long as you're trying your best, or trying to save every puck and giving your best effort, that's all I can do. And that's the struggle that I choose.
Lindsey, I think you led me to one thing I wanted to ask you about, which was, being able to turn on and off that switch of like, oh my gosh, what a great game last night, go Knights, Shea Theodore, like all this stuff. And then like breaking it down and being like, listen, there's a mental health crisis and we need to talk about this. And I see it firsthand all the time with what I do. One day I'm sitting here, I'm chatting, I'm having a great time. I'm talking about country music. I'm talking about that funny thing that happened at the grocery store. I'm talking about I can't believe my fiance would ask me this. Fun topics. And then all of a sudden we're sitting on the 4-year anniversary of the 1 October shooting, and then you've got to turn everything off and go a different direction.
Compartmentalize.
Exactly. And you showing those levels. And I have to commend you, because even just in your Twitter feed, I can see the different levels that you have. And I think that speaks so much to your legitimacy as a broadcaster to be able to have those levels. So kudos to you, because it's not easy to be able to talk about yourself, especially when it comes to a sports broadcasting world. I think my job lends being able to talk about things a little bit easier. I just opened up about my family. My uncle recently diagnosed with ALS, and it took me months to be able to actually talk about it on the radio. But once I did, I felt so much more free. But in a sports radio world, I feel like it's all about the numbers, the stats, and the experience. Whereas when we got to break it down to the hard stuff, you have a different audience there. So I commend you for doing what you do.
Well, first of all, just to throw the word and the respect back at you, I commend you for sharing that story and your uncle's story. That's really tough to do. And just, I sometimes feel very, not just exposed, but almost guilty kind of sharing my BS that I'm dealing with too, because everybody else has their stuff too. And so you kind of feel, well, I have a platform. How dare I take up this space for myself? But the permissibility that you gave to yourself, and in turn, everyone else, like those are the little things that truly matter, I think. And I think that's lacking in sports. I haven't been in this business very long. My co-host Paul says I'm not green, but I like to think of myself as green-ish still. But I don't think it's a coincidence that we're running into so many of these stories in the NHL, in the NFL, in pro sports, on the women's side, in the National Women's Soccer League, and in the USA Gymnastics. And this kind of setting aside that we've done as a society and in turn on an individual level of, first of all, knowing when to compartmentalize, and second of all, circling back, because I just don't think we take out the trash enough. So it heaps up and it finds its way to other people, and hurt finds a way to spread itself around, and to continue to talk about stats, to continue to talk about X's and O's. It's very valid to include those in the conversation, but for me, it can't be the only part. You have to make the humanity the main part, the emotionality the main part, to my detriment most of the time. And it's tough. And it's tough for everyone to go through stuff. It's not hard, or it's not easy for you to talk about your uncle, but it's certainly easier for you to talk about it rather than just like your everyday existence, right? And so, yeah.
You brought up such a good point there. Is like, you need to repeat that, because that's a line that's going to go on a poster in my office. You not taking out the trash. Is that how did you letting the trash pile up? I mean, I think that's genius, because when I wasn't talking publicly about, this thing going on, this haunting behind me and my family, and I wasn't opening up to anybody about it, even though others had, I just lost it. Like a couple weeks ago, it was like a dark day. It was like rainy in Vegas, which it never is. And I just couldn't get my ass off the couch. I mean, quite frankly, because I just was letting my trash pile up and not taking it out and not thinking about it and not talking about it when I felt bad. Even my fiance was like, you can talk to me. And I want to be this big tough man. No, I don't need to talk about my feelings and all this crap. And that's just all BS. It's okay.
Well, and here's the thing,
Jeff.
Here's the thing is that you and your fiance or whoever, or even you could clear out the trash. But here's the thing, there's going to be another drop off tomorrow. And I think that's what really gets me and probably other people, because life is really hard. And then there's everything else that's going on. And so when I share what always my brain tells me when I'm saying, no, keep it to yourself, go on your island. Your island's the best. There's rum here, just like Jack Sparrow told us, or whatever you're looking for to help go down whatever tunnel you are. It's usually because I'm thinking that they're not going to be able to fully articulate the story because there's too much for me to explain, or that it's going to come back anyway. So what's the point of bringing it out? But we Zamboni the ice in between every period for a reason, right? And so same with the trash. And it's hard to do that on a day-to-day basis, just like anything else. But those micro changes, those micro decisions are how I went from Minnesota to Vegas, how anybody really gets anywhere. Because it's not just like one day you pick up and leave and change your whole life. You have to do your own battling on the inside to have your conviction and your principle and know what that is. And then you got to tell other people who are going to tell you that, first of all, you're nuts for even thinking that anyone can do it. And second of all, who do you think you are? And right. So that's extra trash and everything else. And so I don't know, that's, I mean, I'm not really sure where that question is or what answer I'm trying to provide here. There's just a lot of stuff that we all deal with, and that I feel like Robin Leonard and the hockey community are a good representation of that begrudging process we're all going through, of finally being honest, taking out the trash, and just realizing what the necessary process is to survive and hopefully potentially thrive someday. But how about survive today?
Right. And I think speaking about mental health is so important, especially in the sports world. I mean, just years ago, it was the whole thing with Hollywood, right? We have to talk about mental health. We have to talk about child stars. We have to talk about drug addiction and problems. And now that's still there. That's still prevalent. It's still prevalent in the music industry, but it's talked about a lot in those industries, which is good. It's good to talk about these things. I think it could be definitely talked about more in the sports world. And you mentioned Robin Leonard. A picture here of a tweet I saw from you, the very first tweet I saw from you, actually. And Robin Leonard tweeted out, "My name is Robin Leonard, and I'm bipolar 1 and have PTSD. I take medicine, and I have a psychiatrist, and that I talk to once a week. I'm in an NHL program. On the top of that, I fought through hell to be here, and I'm pretty good at stopping pucks. Not perfect, bless you all. Well, this tweet kind of started like this massive wave of tweets, right? Of people coming forth and talking about things. I remember one person commented on there and said, "Hi, I'm Jenny, and my son recently took his life due to struggles with mental illness, and it is something that's been bothering me." And for her to have the courage, because of Robin Leonard Street, to come forth, and you wrote this tweet on your page, and it says, "Hi, my name is Lindsey Brown, and I'm autistic, and I have ADHD. I take medicine to help regulate my nervous system and lightning fast brain. Like many women, I wasn't diagnosed until adulthood. I struggle daily with depression, anxiety, disordered eating, and I talk about sports on the radio too." Which, first of all, for you to come out, pin this tweet at the top of your page, and wear it on your sleeve to make other people feel comfortable about what you're going through, I think it's so brave and commendable, Lindsey. I think it's awesome.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that.
Because it takes a lot to talk about what's going on in our own heads.
Absolutely. And, Robin's story started a long time before they converged before his converged with mine in Las Vegas. But I remember reading his Players Tribune article. I think he was still with Buffalo at the time, or maybe he was with Chicago, one of the stops. But obviously, as a netminder myself, who has a hostile brain, and we have to learn how to deal with that as netminders, that compartmentalization that we were talking about earlier. I know for a fact that a lot of the skills that I use that enables me to do well professionally and personally have been directly results from what I've built up over my goaltending career. And it doesn't mean that it's always healthy. And that's the ultimate kind of deciphering. And what Robin has done for me personally. I remember when he was traded here, and we were still allowed to go in the locker room at the time. This is before COVID happened. And I just went up to him, and I wanted to thank him for writing that article, because he was the first person that I really saw my experience in. And whether that was the mental illness part or it was the goalie connection, I'm not really sure. But in terms of my process and how all of this kind of came about, it's been such a mostly self-realized thing. And not everybody has the opportunity to take the time to self-reflect, let alone have the tools to do it. And so I'm trying to do my best to do what Robin has put an example for, and so many other people are just using him as the main example of how do I best weaponize my issues for myself on the behalf of others, because I can serve myself and others at the same time and feel bad about it, but we can also feel good about it too. Everything exists at the same time. And so that's why I try to just, as you say, wear it on the sleeve, even though some days I want to take it down and put something else up there because it's either more interesting or I don't want to be this today, but that's who I am.
I think that's a great point. Is some days, there's something that may be more important, but you never know who's going to see it. You never know it's going to speak to. You never, understand the impact you can make on somebody's life if you never have a run-in with them. I think that's something, no matter what anybody believes in, that was something that as a kid I was taught in my Sunday school classes. Like, I was always told that, hey, it's okay to not know what your nice thing you did for somebody on the street, what that did for them. Because you never know the chain reaction, but if you want to know what you did right, then it becomes a little bit of a selfish action. You're doing this in order to get something out of it, when in reality, you should be doing these things because it's the right thing to do. And
absolutely.
So for you being outspoken and talking about that, I think it's really, really awesome. And I think that it makes you unique. It makes you special. But also, I love when people are comfortable with their audience enough. And even in just reading your, feed and listening to your show, I feel like I already know you. And we hadn't spoken until before this interview, literally 20 minutes ago.
Well, good. I'm glad, because that's exactly what I'm going for, at least attempting to do.
So I want to go back into hockey. I want to take it back into hockey. We've talked about, mental health, mental illness in hockey, and I think that's a conversation that needs to be continued to have. And anytime that conversation is had, it's super important. But I want to go back into the ins and outs for you. What do you find for the average, below average, or absolutely unknowledgeable fan is the hardest thing to explain to them, because I still watch games, and you know, you hear a whistle and everybody goes, what the hell happened? And we're in a bar full of Knights fans, and 98% of them have no clue why that play was taken aback. Is there one thing you see all the time you're like, yep, let me explain that. That's the hardest. And can you break it down now so maybe someone can learn something today?
I can, and I don't know if it'll give you a satisfactory answer, but it'll give you probably the best answer that I could in terms of explaining why it needs explanation and just the genuine confusion in general, because we all can learn what offsides is, what icing is, if this is a good save, if this is a bad goal. But in terms of the uniformity of refereeing, that's where a lot of people get confused. And it's not just like penalties where everybody boos anytime the Golden Knights go to the box, even when it's the most blatantly obvious penalty ever. Believe it or not, we are all capable of sin here. Right. That's why they have bins on both sides. But in terms of like goaltender interference or offsides, the NHL has had a little bit of trouble honing in on the details of their game of what's a goal and what's not, because it's such a fluid sport. And that's what kind of loops back to what we were starting our conversation with, and why I think hockey's the most engaging and just enveloping sports experience you can have, because you just get so sucked in because there's so much going on. You could just watch one player and there's a million things just going on with him, and there's 9 more. And then there's the puck. And so when there's confusion of whether or not so-and-so's foot was on the line, or if this contact with the goaltender was good or not, the confusion is absolutely warranted. And the NHL could do a lot better of a job explaining that, among many other things. But ultimately, I think we all kind of have gotten to the mode of, well, we rely on the instant replay. This is what the rule book says. Like, sometimes you have to leave room for the unexplainable. Sometimes you do have to chalk it up to the hockey gods, smiting you or blessing you based off of how hard you forechecked in the last 48 hours. Like, that stuff, I believe with my bone marrow, exists. And so I can't be the only one. I'm not saying I'm the right one, but in terms of looking for answers or looking for uniformity, you won't find it in this game. You won't really find it in any game, but I think it's more of an us problem than the game problem.
I think we're asking too much of it. I think you're absolutely right. I'm a lifelong baseball fan, and these whole ideas of robot strike zones and umpires, and listen, like, I was in favor of replay because I've seen so many times now that the technology is there, so we all are better umpires than whoever's, on the field that day. I grew up as a Little League umpire. When my skills very much fell behind those of my peers, I decided to get into umpiring because I loved it so much. And I would recommend anybody, first of all, if you're going to play a sport or know a sport, you should probably try to officiate that sport, even one game, and you probably won't.
Just out of respect for the people that are officiating for you, because I hear stories all the time, and I dealt with it coaching back home for years, of just what the culture at the youth level is and how thankless umpires' jobs are in general. But now, like, it's abusive in a lot of cases. Yeah. Like, you're seeing absolutely wild stories coming out where people are fighting, where it's just escalating too far to a point. And I think, like you said, put yourself in the shoes. Wear the shoes if you have to yourself, because it doesn't really matter how angry you are. That they don't deserve that, because they're just here to say strike or ball. It's like, we're just a game and they're kids.
Right. It would be just like you spending your entire career and never skating out. Never going out and even though you were a college hockey goalie, and I'm guessing you didn't skate out much in those big games, or ever in those games, but you grew up knowing what it was like to play as a defenseman.
My dad made me.
Right.
My dad made me. He said, but before a certain age, I had to do both. And then I think it was more an effort of him hoping that I would deviate away from the goaltending selection, because the second I walked into my first locker room as a mite, I was like, I want to wear those pads. And so they're like, please no, Lindsey, no. And so it was definitely a diversion effort, but like you said, it creates a more holistic experience that might not be needed every day, but you never know when those tools will be.
Right. I think that's super important. And I get scared of youth sports these days, because you hear of kids being groomed to be a pitcher and getting Tommy John surgery at 16. And I'm like, damn, like, and I mean, Lindsey, you and I seem to be about the same age. We're both millennials in the middle of this 20s crisis. And so for us, it kind of comes down to, I don't like to sound like this, but I'm already starting to sound like our parents, where I'm like, well, back in my day, I had to play every position, and then I'd go pitch 4 innings, and then I'd go catch 3 innings, and I'd go do all this because it would work different muscles, and you'd have to skate out because your dad would make you, and that was important. It was important for the athleticism of it. It was important for the humbleness of the sport, but it was also important for the understanding of the game.
Yeah.
You can't
understand each other ultimately. Yep.
Right. You can't
100%.
understand how good of a move your teammate just made, or quite frankly, the offender just made on you to get by you, unless you've tried your very best to do it before.
Well, and it's not even about like whether or not like good play opposition guy, like you're not going to go dap them up or whoever you're playing, but in many ways it allows you to excuse yourself away from perfectionism. Like I know that I struggle with that a lot. And in terms of holding yourself accountable for failing. Mm-hmm. And that's inevitable. And I think that's what's been eroded away from youth sports and with everything. Like all this is interconnected. Jeff, we've talked about what we've really talked about the last couple of minutes ad nauseum on my program, because it's just such a problem that I've realized, and clearly you have, of just the overdevelopment of the actual muscle groups, but then just the individualized mindset. There's so many interconnected layers into how we get to the toxic culture that we inhibit now. And trust me, there was toxic cultures when we were there, and just like with our parents were there. But we're all trying to make a better place, I think, and trying to make it better for the people that are going to enter into the spaces that we have come from ourselves. And so that those little self-realizations, those humble pies you serve yourself, serve others, but again, serve you, so you don't feel like you're the worst person in the world, or that your entire career or future is over because of this 3-on-3 tournament that you just blew a coverage on. It's just, right. Life's too short and sports are too big, or maybe just jobs are too big right now. We gotta reset our mindset.
No, I definitely agree with that. And I think at the end of the day, you make a great point about youth sports. It's a scary thing, but we all got to understand that it's a job, it's a game, it's not the end of the world, whatever it might be. I mean, I've been fired, I've been hired, I've taken people's jobs, people have taken my job. Like, I've been through the ringer, and I understand that at the end of the day, I hate to be super cliche here, but it's not about how hard you get hit, it's about how quickly you get up. And I always believe that, and that makes you stronger. I mean, when I have a great day on the radio, I shine the rest of the day. Like, I had a pretty good show this morning before we chatted. I went back, I saw how many things really got great topics, great interesting callers. I was like, that's a good show. But then I leave it, and I'm like, all right, cool. But when I have a tough day, I feel like I get more out of it. I learn more. And there was definitely an ego that I used to have when I first started in this industry as a 21-year-old, thinking I don't even want to think about the bad shows, because then I'm gonna repeat them. I'm bound to repeat them. But it's like, no, I have to think about the bad shows, because they make me better. They make me a lot better.
Yeah, one of the lines I used a couple weeks ago in terms of, I think we were talking about locker room dynamics or something, but when was it, confrontation breeds competence, or competition and confrontation and championship all start with the letter C, and that's not the only thing they have in common. Right. And that falling down, we not only started to put more pillows down for people and try to ease them back up, but then we don't allow ourselves either the validation to feel good about it, or the validation to pick yourself back up and figure it out. Right. That's it. And it starts from that young age, and you have to be able to self-correct when you get older too, because you can't always be beholden to whatever environment you grew up in and whatever tools you have, because ultimately you do have power and control over what your reaction is and how you respond. But just such in lockstep. This is such a good podcast right now.
Oh yeah, I mean, shoot, we should call it "Do What You Love" with Jeff Kirkshin and Lindsey Brown before the end of this. Thank you, Lindsey.
And love.
You seriously embody what this podcast is all about: doing what you love, wearing your heart on your sleeve. You're a passionate radio host, a hockey fan, a former coach. You love the sport, you love the game, you love the city, and for that, we love you. And I say we love you, like the podcast, but I'm really like a one-man show here.
I use we interchangeably
right,
all the time.
Don't
feel bad.
It's me
Don't
and my
feel bad.
many...
Like, we the Golden Knights. I'm like, no, but that's just locker room brain. But
right.
You know what? I'd rather just go with what I'm doing rather than self-correct and interrupt the flow all the time. So just go with it.
Going with it. Well, we love you here at Do What You Love. And Lindsey, right, I can't thank you enough for joining me. And go Knights go. I appreciate your time.
Of course, Jeff. Thank you so much for having me. Hopefully we can do it again soon.
Anytime. And if you ever need me to break down... Never mind. I can't break anything down in hockey, so we just won't.
Circle back. Hot lap. Circle back. Got it.